This is the new AC200L, Bluetti's new flagship 2000 watt-hour power station. Right here is the older generation, the AC200 Max. Let's break down some of the upgrades over the previous generation. This new model has a larger inverter. It supports 2400 watts output. This also now has built-in fast wall charging. There are no external loud, slow charging bricks. This will charge at a record 2400 watts or 20 amps input. That is crazy fast. This also has a built-in UPS mode advertised for 20 milliseconds of swap over time, and we'll be testing that later in the video with my new oscilloscope. This also has an upgraded solar charge controller which accepts 1200 watts input versus the 900 watts on the previous generation. Now there are a few other upgrades that are worth mentioning. For example, the fan noise has been significantly reduced. You can hardly hear these fans. They've added a second 100 watt USB-C power delivery port. They've changed the DC output from a 12 volt 30 amp to a 48 volt 8 amp output, and they have plans to have different devices that can connect to that. I'll break that down a little bit later in the video. And this also supports Bluetti's new smart app with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity, where the older version only supported Bluetooth. Now what about pricing? The MSRP for the AC200L is $16.99, and Bluetti is launching this at $14.99. That's 73 cents per watt hour. That's one of the best prices that we've seen on a launch from a Bluetti product. So right here is the owner's manual for the new AC200L. So let's go ahead and open this to the first page. I'm going to throw this up on the screen so you guys can follow along as I read this word for word to give you guys all the specifications on the AC200L. Just kidding, guys. I'm not going to waste your time when you guys can go read all that on Bluetti's website. What I want to do is show you guys the actual performance on this power station. I've done so many different tests to see how the AC inverter performs, to see how the DC output performs, and also what happens if you have solar panels connected up. Can we actually get the full charging input? I've done a ton of different charging demos as well. And in the first section of the video, we're going to be testing the AC inverter. So this works really well for a home backup solution, especially because you can connect up multiple expansion batteries and get really long run times. So how does the AC inverter perform? Well, let's find out. Let's verify the quality of the power that the inverter produces. I started my first test by setting up a 2400 watt load to stress the power station. I like to make sure that nothing goes wrong as it's running at peak output. After the test had been going for a couple minutes, I checked the output with my oscilloscope. It was putting out an excellent sine wave at 60 Hertz and 120 volts output. These are great results. Once the tests had been going for about 10 minutes, the power station fans were surprisingly quiet. The AC200L has two variable fan speeds that alternate as needed. When measuring with my sound meter at 3 feet away, I was getting around 40 decibels at the slower speed. When the power station fans sped up, I was seeing around 48 decibels at their higher speed. The fans alternate between these two speeds while running the load. Now, do these fans move enough air to keep the internal components from overheating? When using my thermal camera, I measured 132 degrees near the fan exhaust port, and I'm guessing this was a component of the inverter board, which should be able to handle this temperature just fine. After I finished those measurements, my stopwatch hit the 16-minute mark, and the AC200L passed the max load test. How many watts will the inverter allow you to pull before it shuts down from being overloaded? I turned up the load on the inverter to test the max wattage, and the inverter supported 2900 watts before it shut down from being overloaded. How much usable capacity should you expect from the AC200L? The internal LFP battery is rated for 2048 watt hours of capacity. When draining the power station down until it shut off, I was able to measure 1830 watt hours. This result of 1830 watt hours is 89.3% of the advertised capacity. These are great results. This power station also supports the ability to connect up multiple expansion batteries from Bluetti, the B210, the B230, and the B300. I connected up a B230 expansion battery to the AC200L for a total capacity of 4096 watt hours. Doing a second capacity test, I measured 3570 watt hours, or 87.1% of the advertised capacity. Using either of these expansion batteries is a great way to get a longer runtime on the power station. Next, how much power is used as the AC inverter is enabled and sitting idle? I started with the power station at 100% state of charge and left the inverter enabled for 10 hours with no load. When I came back, it was sitting at 95% state of charge, meaning that the inverter had used 5% of the battery after 10 hours, or about 0.5% per hour. These results are much improved over the older AC200 Max. How long will the AC200L run a full-size refrigerator? With food being so expensive these days, you do not want it to spoil during a power outage. I started the test at 100% state of charge and the power station ran for 32 hours and still had 7% of the capacity remaining before I ended the test. You could get even longer results using solar panels to charge the power station or by connecting an expansion battery. Now, how fast is the UPS cutover time on the AC200L? When it senses grid power going down, the power station automatically swaps over from wall power to using the batteries inside. This is advertised to happen within 20 milliseconds. Using my new oscilloscope, I was able to record the actual UPS cutover time. Looking closer, you can see I measured 13.1 milliseconds. These results are quite a bit faster than the advertised specifications, so thumbs up there. To confirm it works well with the PC, I simulated 6 different power outages by unplugging the power station from the wall while running my desktop workstation, LED monitor, and studio lights. 6 out of 6 times the PC and monitor were still running after it was unplugged, so this UPS mode definitely works well. Does the power station inverter create any interference or noise when enabled? This test is helpful for people wanting to power sensitive audio equipment. Using my dirty electricity meter, the electromagnetic interference reading, or EMI, was pretty standard at 1425 millivolts of noise. I also tested my guitar amp plugged into the inverter to see if the output would be affected. So you can definitely hear an audible noise on the amp, and here's an example of what the older generation Bluetti AC200 Max sounds like for reference. I also wanted to test what type of interference I would hear on a small handheld AM radio. With the AC inverter running, these were the results of the test.
Taking down the chair.
Yeah. And what's his face? Angel Reese. You realize that the Utah guy makes those free throws?
Because of the radio interference, I'd recommend keeping your equipment at least a couple feet away from the power station. Now, some of the highlights while testing the AC inverter, we got the full 120 volts output at 60 Hertz, and this had a really good sine wave. Now, we were able to get the full 2400 watts output for 15 minutes, and we even pulled 2900 watts before it shut down from being overloaded. Now, even under those max loads, the fans were super quiet. They're not harsh at all. I really like the noise of these fans. Now, what about capacity? Well, we discharged this down. We got 89% of the advertised capacity, so this is fairly efficient. And I was also very impressed with the UPS cutover time. I measured 13.1 milliseconds versus the advertised 20 milliseconds. So this is actually one of the fastest UPS modes that I've tested so far on the channel. Really, the only thing that I can kind of complain about is the noise on the AC inverter. So remember, if you're running any sensitive audio equipment off the AC inverter, there is a chance that noise may come over to your device. So just keep that in mind. Now, in the next section of the video, I want to test the DC output in USB ports. Well, how do they actually perform? Well, let's do some testing to find out. How much usable capacity can we pull from the DC output as we discharge the power station? The AC200L is advertised to have 2048 watt hours of capacity. While draining the power station completely down via my battery load tester, I was able to pull a total of 1697 watt hours over a 15-hour time period. These results were 82.8% of the advertised capacity, which is a little bit below my goal of at least 85%. How much power is used while the DC output is sitting idle with no load? I started the test at 100% state of charge on the power station, and checking in 10 hours later, it was sitting at 97% state of charge, meaning the DC output is very efficient and only uses 0.3% per hour while sitting enabled with no load. Now, what voltage do you get from the DC output? I confirmed the DC output of the AC200L is regulated at 13.3 volts. That means you won't have any issues running 12 volt devices even when the power station is near 0% state of charge, since the voltage output remains constant. How much wattage can you pull from the 12 volt cigarette port? While connecting my load tester, I pulled 142 watts continuously. As I tried to pull more power, it would shut down and display an overloaded error on the screen. Since there's only one DC port, you'll need to purchase a 12 volt cigarette splitter if you want to run 2 separate loads at the same time. Just make sure you don't go over 142 watts combined. Now, where did the high power 30 amp DC output go? Bluetti opted to replace their 30 amp DC output with a 48 volt 8 amp power port. This port is rated for 384 watts of power. I don't have the proprietary power cable, so I couldn't test this port in my video. They do plan to release the Bluetti D40 soon. This is a 48 volt to 12 volt step down converter you can purchase separately to get high DC output if needed. So stay tuned for a future video where I can test that product. How well do the USB ports perform? The AC200L has two 100 watt USB-C ports and two additional USB-A fast charge ports rated at 18 watts each. When testing the USB-C power delivery ports, I was able to pull 100 watts from each port separately. However, when I tried charging two 100 watt devices at the same time, the power station would shut down and the DC output would error out anytime I pulled over 142 watts. Now, I first thought this was a firmware bug and I reported it to Bluetti, but after confirming with the Bluetti engineering team, this was put into place by design. So if you want to use the USB ports on the AC200L, you'll want to make sure you don't go over 142 watts total. Many of the other brands that I've tested on the channel can support 2 or 3 100 watt ports at the same time, so quite the bummer that this one can't. How much power can you get from the USB ports and the DC output combined? After connecting up multiple loads to the power station, I was able to pull around 250 watts continuously from the DC output and the USB ports. Does the DC output shut off randomly while running loads overnight? In order to make sure this was not an issue on the AC200L, I plugged in my Iceco Go20 12 volt fridge into the 12 volt cigarette port and configured the set point to 36 degrees. When I came back after 36 hours, the DC output was still powered on and the battery had only dropped down to 75%. You'd get quite the runtime if you were camping with this power station and a 12 volt fridge. How does the DC output affect a handheld AM radio? Here's a demo of what happens when you have a small radio next to the power station with the DC output enabled.
The public or anybody understands that because waste time. So we try to stress to them
to avoid this interference, you'd want to keep your sensitive devices a few feet away from the power station. Now, even though we got really good performance on the AC inverter for this power station, I kind of feel like the DC output is an afterthought, so let me break down why I feel that way. Now, starting with the USB 100 watt ports. You can't use both of them at the same time. If you try to pull 200 watts, it fails. If you try to pull 160 watts, it fails. So to avoid that, I think it's going to be just easiest to cover up one of the ports and pretend that it doesn't exist. Now, wouldn't it have been easier for Bluetti to just have maybe one 100 watt port and one 40 watt port? Because why put 200 watt ports if you can't use them? Now, I really like the potential of this 48 volt 8 amp output, but the fact that you have to purchase a different device to use it is kind of interesting. I mean, remember the AC200 Max had the 30 amp output right here on the front that put 12 volts out. And we do not have that on this unit. We have one 12 volt cigarette plug that's good for around 142 watts. Now, this device that connects to this is called the D40. This could have, really good performance. We don't really know too much of what it does. It could be really, really cool, but it could also be really, really expensive. Remember, the Bluetti charging enhancer, which is a pretty simple device, that costs $200. So what do you think the D40 is going to cost if it kind of does a bunch of different things? Now, in the next section of the video, I want to test all the charging options for the Bluetti AC200L. How does it actually perform with solar panels? Can they be connected 24/7? Does dual charging work? What about pass-through charging? Well, let's find out. Now, I first want to break down the charging ports on the AC200L. On the left-hand side of the power station, you have your DC input, you have your AC input, you have a grounding lug, a circuit protector, and also where you connect up your expansion batteries. Now, the specifications for the DC input are 12 volts all the way up to 145 volts. It does have a 15 amp limit, and you can charge up to 1200 watts. Now, breaking down the AC charging port, it accepts 120 volts input up to 20 amps. That is a total of 2400 watts. That is really fast charging. Now, these are the charging cables that come with the AC200L. Right here you have your DC charging cable with the aviation port that plugs into the side of the power station. This has a male XT90. Now, both of these adapters connect to this one. This one's for solar panels with MC4 adapters, and this one is for car charging with the 12 volt cigarette plug. Now, right here you have your AC wall charging cable. This allows you to fast charge the power station. There are no longer any external power bricks. Now, all of these wires fit into this storage bag. Now, how fast will the AC200L charge at 12 volts? To simulate car charging, I've connected up to my 12 volt battery, and on the screen you can see we're getting 98 watts input. So if the power station was completely empty, this would take around 20 hours to completely fill it up. Now what about charging at 24 volts? To simulate a 24 volt battery, I have a 12 to 24 volt boost converter that's putting 24 volts into the power station. If you look at the screen, we're charging at 186 watts now. So instead of taking 20 hours, this will now take 11 hours to fully charge the power station from 0%. So if you want to charge faster, you got to raise up your voltage. Now I also want to demonstrate a 12 to 36 volt boost converter so you guys could see that once you go over about 32 volts or so, it uses the full 15 amp input limit. For example, we're charging at 527 watts now. That is 36 volts at around 15 amps. So lots of power available if you can get above 32 volts. One way I like to extend the runtime on my power station is by connecting it up to a 48 volt server rack battery. And this kind of acts like a DIY expansion battery. So let's see what happens when I connect this up. So with the EG4 server rack battery connected up, we're charging at 743 watts. Now I just wanted to show you guys the display of the battery so you can see what's happening. It's sitting at 51.97 volts and we are discharging the battery at 14.7 amps. Now this is only at 50% state of charge, so we actually would charge faster if this battery was at a higher voltage. Now the fastest way to charge the AC200L is via the AC wall charging cable. So I've connected the cable, let's go ahead and plug it into the wall and see what wattage we can get. With the power station plugged into the wall, we are currently charging at 1200 watts. Now looking at the Bluetti Smart app, there are actually 3 different charging modes. You have standard charging mode, which is default, you have turbo charging mode, and silent charging mode. Now Bluetti provides a table in the owner's manual that breaks down all these charging combinations, including dual charging numbers. So pause the video if you need more time to check them out. Now I wanted to test out each of these charging modes, so I set the power station to silent charging mode, and you can see it's charging around 800 watts on the screen and the fans are hardly running. When selecting turbo charging mode, the power station charged at around 1430 watts. I was expecting more power, so when I checked the Bluetti app settings, I discovered the charging limit for the AC200L is set to 12 amps by default. In order to charge faster, you'll need to enable Pro Charging mode, and this requires a password from Bluetti support. After enabling Pro Charging mode, I set the charging speed to 15 amps or 1800 watts. This is the safe charging limit for the stock 15 amp charging cable. I also briefly tested charging at the maximum 20 amp limit. This is the fastest option I have seen on a power station this size. Now keep in mind the stock charging cable will overheat at this level. Bluetti offers a heavier duty charging cable you can purchase separately if you'd like to charge at the full 20 amps or 2400 watts consistently. Now what about dual charging the AC200L? I've gone ahead and connected my 48 volt battery at the same time as AC turbocharging, so let's take a closer look at the screen. So with both AC and DC power sources connected to the power station, we are charging at a total of 2200 watts, so this does support dual charging without an issue. Does AC or DC charging input get priority when dual charging? I set the power station to silent charging mode, which will cap off the total input around 800 watts in order to see which input would get higher wattage. Looking closer at the screen, you can see 740 watts coming from the 48 volt server rack battery or DC input, and then around 100 watts coming in from AC charging. So the power station definitely gives priority to DC input when dual charging. Now what about pass-through charging, or the ability to charge and discharge the power station at the same time? Now most power stations do support this feature nowadays, but I wanted to make sure on the AC200L. So with the DC output, USB ports, and AC inverter all enabled while charging the power station, I didn't notice any issues while running this test. Now the last charging test that I want to do on the AC200L have to do with solar panels. So let's go ahead and take the power station outside and do some real world solar tests. And then after that, what happens if we have solar panels connected 24/7? Well, we're going to find out. Now there are 2 different solar arrays that I want to test with the Bluetti AC200L. This first array here uses Renogy's 200 watt flexible panels, and they are wired together in series for a total of 1000 watts. We'll see how that one does. The second array that I want to test with is this one here up on my carport. This is a 1600 watt array using 4 410 watt solar panels wired together in series. Now as for solar conditions today, it's around 40 degrees. It's a late fall day, pretty clear skies, so we'll have to see how much power we can get. So I'm going to use this inline voltmeter to test the voltage. So open circuit voltage for the Renogy array is 113.7 volts. Let's see what happens as we connect it up to the power station. So with the Renogy array connected up to the AC200L, we are getting 959 watts input. So really good power from this array. So now checking the voltage at max power, we're getting 92.3 volts. So you can see that the voltage of the solar array drops down quite a bit once it's under load. But even just letting it sit here for a second, looks like we're getting a little bit more power, 966 watts. I really like this solar panel array from Renogy. Now, because it's a late fall day, the sun is very low in the sky, so you have to have your solar panels angled like this to get peak power. Now, with this other array that we're going to test up here, the panels are pretty flat, so I'm not sure we're going to see quite as much power from these panels because they're not angled properly at the sun. So checking the open circuit voltage for the solar panels on top of the carport, we're getting 142.9 volts. So really close to the voltage cutoff. Now we should be okay because this voltage is going to drop under peak load. So let's go ahead and connect up the solar panels. So I just connected the array up to the AC200L. We are getting 1168 watts charging input. So really close to that 1200 watt limit. So taking a look at the voltmeter now, we're getting quite a bit less voltage under peak load, right around 120 to 121 volts. Now, after about 15 minutes, the power station is almost full. It charged really quick. Now you can see the wattage is ramping down because we're getting closer to 100% state of charge, but thumbs up to Bluetti for actually allowing you to get near the full charging input via solar panels. Now, what about connecting solar panels 24/7? Do you see any issues on the power station, or do you hear any relay clicking noises at dusk or dawn? Well, I connected the AC200L up to my 1000 watt Renogy array, and in the morning you can see I was getting 33 watts charging input, and I didn't see any issues. So it does appear that you can connect solar panels 24/7 to the Bluetti AC200L. Wow guys, impressive results while testing the charging options on this power station. First off, a full 2400 watts via AC input. That's 600 watts higher than any other power station in this size bracket. Remember, all the other power stations that I've tested in the past have charged to 1800 watts, but it's really cool to have that option because think if you have 2 expansion batteries connected onto this. You know, the faster you can charge that entire setup, the better. So the fact that you can use the custom settings and get this up to 20 amps or 2400 watts is really cool. The other huge benefit about this is the actual ability to get the 1200 watts via solar input. I love that you can just stack those panels together in series. This has the 145 volt cutoff. Really easy to get that 1200 watts. Now, Bluetti knows that people want to charge with solar as a priority, so they have dual charging on this, and the fact that it has a priority to solar charging first and then fills in the rest with AC charging, I absolutely love that. So huge thumbs up to Bluetti for having all these really good features for charging on the AC200L. So let's go ahead and break down the Bluetti Smart App. I have the device in here working. You can see it defaults to Bluetooth connection. You can change that to Wi-Fi if you want. So you can see the state of charge, how you're connected. You can see PV or grid input, and you can see your output. So let's go ahead and turn on the DC output just to show you how that works. And just after a second, you can see that it is enabled and power is flowing to it. You also have the ability to turn off the entire power station remotely if you want. Just keep in mind you can't turn that back on, so I'm going to cancel that. You can see your battery packs. So this shows the status of the battery packs and their state of charge if they are connected. And you can also see the PV energy that you produced over time. Now there are a ton of different other settings. You can view the user manuals. You can set up network settings if you want this to connect via Wi-Fi. And you can change the default connection mode between Bluetooth and Wi-Fi as well. Now here under UPS modes, you have a bunch of different UPS modes. I am using the standard, but you could use PV priority if you want, or time control, and there's also customized UPS settings, and it shows what is currently happening on the UPS. Now I recommend using grid self-adaption mode. This allows you to charge from a wider range of voltage. Powerlifting is where the inverter drops down the voltage so you can run purely resistive loads. So most people probably won't want to use this, but you can if you want. Eco mode allows you to turn eco mode on for AC or DC outputs. And you also have the ability to turn the screen off. So I have the screen turned on for the video, but you can have it set to 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, or never turning off. You can set your DC input sources, and you can also upgrade the firmware. I am running the current up-to-date firmware on this model. Under advanced settings, there's one thing that I want to show you. So if you want to charge faster from the grid, the default allowment is 1 to 12 amps. So that's around 1400 watts. And if you want to go higher than that, remember this can charge up to 20 amps or 2400 watts. You have to enable Pro mode, and you do need a password to get that. So by default, the fastest charging from the grid is going to be 12 amps or less. And I do like the ability to set that exactly what you want. So lots of different options here in the Smart App. Now, what about the warranty and customer support for this product? Well, Bluetti offers a 5-year warranty, And if you would have asked about their customer support a year ago, it definitely would have been a mixed bag, but I've been getting a lot better feedback about Bluetti and their support lately. They promised to revamp their customer support earlier this year, and you can definitely tell a difference. For example, I called customer support and asked multiple questions about this product 3 different times. And each time I was able to talk to a different person over the phone within 5 minutes of dialing the number. So much better than it was a year ago. And also, I don't get nearly the same complaints that I used to get on my Bluetti videos. So in that, I feel that it's much better. Wow guys, now that we've finished the testing on the AC inverter, DC output, and charging demos, we can take the performance numbers for this power station and put it through my power station grading system. Now, if you haven't seen that before, it's available on my website. Basically, we take all those numbers and we give the power station a grade on 1 through 10 so we can compare it against the competition. So let's go ahead and see how the AC200L did. So up on the screen, you're gonna see my new power station grading system. There are 20 requirements the power station needs to pass in order to get a perfect score. On the right-hand side, you have the grading scale. So let's go ahead and see how the AC200L did. So here are the results. We did not get 85% of the DC capacity. There was noise on the AC inverter. And also we did not get 150 watts of DC output. So with those 3 items, we lost 1.5 points. So the final grade is a B, or 8.5 out of 10 points available. So a great respectable score for the AC200L. Now I will include the link to my power station grading sheet down in the video description if you want to check that out, because you can check out the AC200 Max and its score, and you can compare them side by side with all the specification and performance numbers, and of course any other power stations I've tested on the channel. Now, what about the differences between these two? Well, I definitely feel that this is an upgrade over the AC200 Max. There's just so many things about this that make it better. The fast AC wall charging, the UPS mode, the upgraded smart app connectivity, the fact that this takes more solar input. The list goes on and on, so I do feel that this is a better power station. Now with the DC output, you guys are gonna have to duke that out down in the comment section. Would you prefer the 48 volt output, or would you rather have the 12 volt 30 amp output? Throw a comment down below and let me know what you guys think about the differences with the DC output. Now, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Also, did you guys know that I spend tons of time testing these power stations? And I often get the question, how can I support your channel? Well, if you look down below, I've enabled channel memberships. If you click the join button, you can actually support the channel with a monthly fee, and you actually get priority to replies on my comments. You'll get behind the scenes videos, and you'll also have a special tag next to your name showing you're a channel member. So everyone that's joined the channel as a member, thank you so much. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to join the membership program. Now remember, the AC200L is launching at the price of $14.99, so 73 cents per watt hour. And I'll include any discount codes that I get down in the video description so you can save additional money. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys sticking to the end. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.